I'm Samalit Hogan with the Massachusetts Small Business Development Center Network. I'm the Regional Director of the Western Mass Office. I welcome you to today's webinar on reshaping your financial narrative. Today's webinar, we're co-hosting with various organizations, including the New England Veterans Chamber of Commerce, SCORE, the Center for Women Enterprise, Mass Growth Capital Corporation, Valley Community Development, Common Capital, Franklin County CDC, and the MSBDC offices at Salem State and Clark University. We also want to thank all of our sponsors and funders of our program, the Small Business Administration, the State of Massachusetts Executive Office of Housing and Economic Development, UMass Eisenberg School of Management, and the MSBDC is accredited by America's SBDC. So thank you all for joining us today. We hope you enjoyed today's webinar. Following this webinar, we will be sending out the copies of the ebooks that we promised, Vigilance Resolutions Guide, Bringing Your Team Back to Work with Maximum Safety and Wellness Post-COVID-19, and the eMyth, Chief Financial Officer, co-authored by Fred Parrish, who's one of today's presenters. So without further ado, I'm gonna pass it over to Lisa Ducharme. She's the Executive Director of the New England Veterans Chamber of Commerce.
Thank you, Sam, and thank you everyone for attending. Today we are presenting Reshaping Your Financial Narrative, which is the final in our series. With us today is Fred Parrish and Lee Goldberg. Fred Parrish is the founder and CEO of the Profit Experts and the Profit Institute. He is also the CFO of the Veterans Business Project, as well as the co-author of the eMyth Chief Financial Officer, which, as Sam said, you're going to get a PDF copy. Next. Since 1980, he has held positions from staff accountant to CEO in both public and private companies, with revenues ranging from startup to $3.5 billion. Fred also served on the board of directors for 12 organizations in aerospace manufacturing, healthcare services, business services, insurance, international missions, technology, and document management. Fred has a broad experience in both operations and financial management in a wide range of industries and at all levels of the organization. Fred is a speaker and instructor on subjects related to profit and cash flow optimization. Next, Lee Goldberg is the founder and CEO of Veteran. He has over 25 years of experience as a chief executive officer, chief restructuring officer, or financial advisor to over 300 companies, including CEO of 14 companies. He is a former partner in the business restructuring group at Coopers & Lybrand, a founding partner of the Recovery Group, now Deloitte CRG, and a former senior credit officer at the Bank of Boston. He is also a certified turnaround professional. He is past president and founder of the Northeast chapter of the Turnaround Management Association and has taught at graduate business schools at Northeastern University and Boston College, and has been a frequent guest lecturer at the Harvard Business School. A former Army officer, he's also a Vietnam veteran. Lee is a former director and past chair of the World Education, a nonprofit education in training and technical assistance in literacy, adult education, and health education around the world. So these gentlemen definitely know finance. Next. Fred, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay, thanks, Lisa. Good afternoon, everyone. Glad you're here. Hopefully, we'll be able to give you some good information. You know, what has been happening for the last 2 or 3 months is unprecedented. And so we are in a situation today under these circumstances that we really have never seen before. And so I think it's probably pretty safe to say that the way you are operating today, or the environment that you are trying to get back up and running in today, is nothing at all like it was 6 months ago. But a really important point to consider here is 6 months from now is really not going to be like either one of those. It is going to be something different. And so in my experience, the first step in trying to understand that journey, that process, is to get a good handle on where you are today. So if you're going to solve a problem, you first have to identify and understand that problem. And so a financial triage is the idea, everyone understands the term triage, but what we want to do is have a clear understanding of where you are today. Where you were 6 months ago, unfortunately, is basically irrelevant. Where you are today, what is your current revenue? And these seem to be fairly simple concepts, but I can tell you, in my 40 years of experience, the numbers, when you get in and start doing the proper level of analysis, are rarely exactly what you thought they were. There is always a surprise in the numbers. And so in analyzing your current revenue, understand not only the level of revenue, but the mix of revenue and how that mix of revenue is going to be supported. And then what the margins are as it relates to each of those different types of revenue, and how that blend is going to affect your cash flow over time. You see down through there are payroll costs, you have raw material costs, all those essential support items. If you're going to be rebuilding your business, you certainly have to be doing some sales and marketing and advertising, and really getting a handle on the true fixed costs in the business. Because the variable costs are going to fluctuate with revenue, as you already know. But it's those fixed costs and how well you can manage those that is going to give you the edge in building back to a level of sustainability. So Lee, you want to jump in and give us some wisdom here?
Yeah, thank you, Fred. This is an honor to be able to join this webinar and to join you, Fred. So thank you very much for the opportunity. Much appreciated. So what I'd like to add in terms of this particular slide is look at this particular situation we face ourselves as an opportunity to take a step back and take a look at your company and be realistic. Don't panic. Be realistic about what's going on. I say communicate, communicate, communicate. Talk to your customers. Find out how realistic your orders are, how realistic it is for you to believe that you can count on them in terms of your current backlog and sales, whether or not it's going to be delivered in the fashion which you expect or not, because that's the basis upon which you can then take a forecast of your revenues. And don't forget, revenues is not cash. You have to be able to collect the revenues in order to be able to collect the cash. And then you can start looking at what expenses are essential and what expenses can I start cutting in order to be able to make sure that I've got enough income coming in to cover those expenses. So I would just add to what Fred has said on this particular page is focus on cash, be realistic, don't panic. There may be opportunities for you to pivot or to adjust your business based on what's going on in the marketplace today. But look at this as an opportunity to look at your business, not necessarily get drowned in your business.
That's excellent, Lee. Thanks. Excellent. Thank you. So how we are able to move from point A today to that point B, C, D, and E down the road really is going to take some clarity about the actions that are required. And so you're going to need to be making decisions, and there are always multiple options for what decision you can make. And in my experience, there rarely is just one right answer. There's usually more than one right answer. It's just a matter of degree and opportunity and effectiveness. So finding that best answer and making the decision on that information and moving in that best direction is going to be the important aspect here. So your financial position today certainly is going to drive your ability to execute on any decisions that you are looking to make and any initiatives that you're looking to undertake. So you, again, need to understand where you are in that financial triage so you know what resources are available, how you can go about executing on a plan, and what all of those support activities are behind that in order to make that a successful effort. Now, when we look at where we are today, what we're saying here correlates to what you did before. I said on the last slide that what happened 6 months ago is basically irrelevant because you may be at 50% capacity. You may be even at 25% capacity. You may be at zero. I still know companies today that 60 and 90 days after the shutdown, they still are at zero revenue. And so they are at zero capacity. And they need to understand as they ramp up to these different levels of business, what is it that they can be doing differently to manage that environment more effectively, to provide some sustainability in the business so that you will survive over time. A good example, I think, in the capacity question is if you are operating, let's just say a restaurant, for example. Rent in a restaurant, if it gets too high, it is an extremely big problem because no matter what you do, no matter how many people you run through the door, if your rent is too high, your labor costs, your food costs are going to be sufficient. You may not be able to be profitable. The problem that you have at 50% capacity, your rent is not going to change. So at 50% capacity, the impact of your rent has now doubled. So you've got to look at the business differently and manage, again, coming back specifically to those fixed costs, and manage those as carefully as you possibly can, and find out what is truly fixed and not what you think is fixed. There are sometimes things that can be restructured, sometimes things that can be delayed, that will at least lower that threshold, that fixed cost threshold, down to a level where you can operate for a while, generate some cash flow, and then be able to move that back up to where it was before. One other thing that I think is a very interesting thought is to go out and look at what your competitors are doing, what they're doing well, what they're not doing well, and capitalize on that intelligence so that you can position yourself in the best possible place relative to that competition based on real live information that you were able to glean from that review. Lee, what else do you have for us here?
You know, thank you, Fred. That was great. I think I just have a couple of things to add. Getting back to the financial impact and decisions, you know, every decision you make has a financial impact, including no decision. I mean, some people just panicked and they can't make the decision. We just completed a veteran program in New Hampshire, and we completed the program just before COVID-19 hit in March of 2020. And as a result of that, the growth plan that our participants put together was basically out the window. So I was really pleased to see some of our graduates pivot their business. They took a step back and they pivoted. They took a look at what the customers were that they had prior to the pandemic, and then what their product or services were, and what the opportunities were in the marketplace that would allow them to take their business and pivot it so that they could be good suppliers or providers of services to those customers who needed their services given the pandemic. So for example, one company was a company that was a cleaning business, and they came up with an antimicrobial cleaning product that they could sell to hospitals. We had another business that was in the cabinetry business. And they came up with a plastic shield that they can then sell to restaurants and to offices. So take this opportunity to take a step back, look at your business, and looking at your competitors. Some of your competitors may not survive, and it may be an opportunity for you to pick up some business that they had that you can now take over. So be creative. Don't look at this necessarily as an, oh my God, look at it as an opportunity.
Yeah, that's great. And go ahead, Lisa.
Sorry, Fred. I got a question for both of you all. So we have someone who is a new entrepreneur launching a Cuban food service. And I know both of you are very familiar with startups, but when you start looking at a financial triage and you start looking at the percentages, you know, she's trying to figure out what, she's still building the financial structure of the business. Do you have any advice? And it's important to note that she's going to start slow and small with a takeout format from a commercial kitchen.
Lee, you want to try this one first?
So she's starting out, she's doing a takeout business, which obviously is what everybody's doing today is takeouts. So assuming that she's able to gain a customer base by promoting her product, and I'm assuming the product is a great product, I'd love to try it. She's got to first figure out exactly what kind of revenue she's going to be able to generate. It's a cash business, basically. So she's going to have food expenses. I don't know what her labor expense is, whether she's doing this on her own or she has others. But I think the most important thing for her to do is to come up with a plan as to how you think you're going to be able to generate sufficient revenue and cash in your business over the short period of time as you're starting to grow your revenues. And then the fixed expenses will be a function of how much you can generate to cover those fixed expenses. You may have to borrow some money from the bank or through an SBA guarantee to help you with startup working capital. But you know, I would certainly encourage you to do everything possible to put your plan together and then figure out how you're going to fund that growth. Fred?
Yeah, that's exactly right, Lee. Thanks. Yeah, I would say too, the plan is absolutely critical to success. And what you need to plan for is sufficient operating capital throughout the startup and into that level of business where it will be sustainable. What you don't want to have happen is get 3/4 of the way into this process, start to have some good success, and run out of cash. That is absolutely the most critical aspect of what you're doing. So what Lee was saying about building that plan, understanding the cash flow, if you need a loan, you need to get the capital. If you can get it from friends and family, there are all different ways to get working capital for your business. But please make sure that you have sufficient capital to get you to where you are going. And the only way to know that answer is to put that plan in place over time. I'm sure you've done some work up to now and you understand what the operating costs look like based on hopefully different levels of business. But timing of when all these things happen and when that capital comes in to support that activity is as critical as the amount of capital you have available. So, you know, if you have $100,000 that you have available, but you don't get it in time to help you build the business, it does you no good.
I would just add to that, Fred, always assume it's going to cost you more than you're planning for.
Always,
So
absolutely.
Always make sure you've got more capital than you originally planned for, because you're probably going to need it, especially now, especially when people are a little bit shy about going out back into restaurants. I think the takeout business is great. I think the opportunity is great. Just make sure you've got enough planning done and enough working capital set aside to fund the growth.
And I'd like to add, remember, you're never alone. So you do have the Small Business Development Center right here locally, as well as throughout Massachusetts, or actually throughout the United States. You also have SCORE, as well as the SBA. So if you're not working with any of those folks, please make sure you connect with somebody because they're always happy to help you. And if you're a veteran, always connect with me.
Yeah, and they are great resources. They can give you a tremendous amount of support.
Can I just add, can I put a little plug in for my program here, Lisa? So Veteran is running an online program, a first online program starting in August for veteran small business owners in New England, New York, and New Jersey. And I encourage any veteran small business owners out there who've been in business for a while to please go to our website at vetrn.org, veteran.org. Take a look at the program, and if you're interested in applying, please submit an application, and I'll get back to you and see if we can get you on the program.
Excellent, excellent. So we discussed on the previous slide generally about cost structure and how to manage that maybe in a little bit different way. But the reason we want this conversation to take place again is it is such a critical aspect of what you will be managing over time. If you are already in business, you understand that. If you are about to start in business, then you need to understand how critical it is not only to manage these aspects of the business, but to clearly understand the impact of every decision you make in every one of these areas. What we talked about. Staffing, be careful what decisions you make in terms of staffing. Payroll, in my experience, is the number one, the largest controllable cost in just about any company you can think of. In fact, I can't think of one right now today where that is not the case. And once you put people in place, once you bring someone on or multiple people, it is very difficult to change that. So be very thoughtful about the timing of when you hire people. You do not want to be hiring and laying off and hiring and laying off over and over and over again. It gets very expensive. It is devastating to the people who are hired and then laid off. And it really does not do your reputation any good. The fixed materials we talked about, make sure you manage that fixed cost very, very closely. Again, the higher your fixed cost, the absolute floor of your cash flow needs to be. If your costs are all variable, then as revenue goes up and down, you can manage it much more effectively. So what I mean by variable is food costs in a restaurant, for example. The more people who buy a meal, the higher that food cost is going to go, but you've got the revenue to cover it. If you have, again, a high rent, high fixed labor, high fixed equipment costs, for example, and we'll talk about that in a minute, that means that before you can even cover your food costs in a meal, you have to be able to cover all those fixed costs. So the higher that number is, the more difficult that becomes. Maintenance, is that maintenance on the space? Is that maintenance on equipment? Is that maintenance on your fixtures? Whatever that might be, if you are in a, again, let's just use a restaurant or a salon, for example, maybe you have fixtures. If they are run down and they look like they are not well kept, they're very old, they're broken, they're torn, whatever that is, that's not a good look for your business, and that is not going to help you in building back that customer base. Advertising, marketing, sales, we talked about that also. And depending on what intelligence you can get from that client, editor review, it will help with your advertising and your sales effort. Cleaning supplies. This is something that in the past has been a very nominal cost. In the world we live in today, everything has to be cleaned on a regular basis in order for you to be able to operate without problems, because if someone is able to determine that people coming into your place of business are contracting the coronavirus, that is not going to help your long-term ability to stay in business. So those costs can start to skyrocket depending on how much of that you're going to have to be doing and how often. Lee, anything to add to that?
Yeah, so thank you, Fred. That's great. I'd like to just add the following. You know, financial statements consist of an income statement of which the cost structure is a very important part, but it's also a cash flow, and we've talked how important having a positive cash flow is, especially at this time. And the third financial statement is a balance sheet. And on the balance sheet, you've got things such as inventory levels, accounts receivable, and trade payables. And those are really illiquid cash items. So to the extent that you've got lower revenues, you know, you've got to reduce your inventory levels. Otherwise, your inventory levels are just going to sit there and they're not going to turn the way they would normally turn prior to the pandemic. So look at your inventory levels, see whether or not they're appropriate for the current business environment. Look at your accounts receivable, make sure your customers are paying their receivables, you're collecting your receivables. Don't be afraid to call them and find out why they haven't been paid. Look at your trade payables. If cash is tight, call your vendors and tell them cash is tight. You know, can I push off some kind of schedule? And the other thing is look at your leases and your contracts. You might have issues legally with your leases and your landlord, or maybe you have bank lending and you have contracts there. I would take a real hard look at those and make sure you're not putting yourself in default. Or you may have issues that you want to talk to your landlord or your bank about. Don't be afraid to pick up the phone and call them and have a conversation about what's really going on in the business, because you don't want them calling you just because you've been shy about picking up the phone to call them. So those are the things I would add to this particular slide, Fred.
So
Yeah,
before we go to the next slide, perfect there, leave it there. But we have another question that I think really goes with the cost structure. So this person is staffing and recruiting of food and beverage and hospitality people for 16 years. The industry is decimated and highly controlled, and many may not come back for over a year. They are considering adding market segment light industrial / warehouses. What do you think of this? And they don't know where to begin.
Fred, why don't you take that one?
Okay, yeah, I think you absolutely will need to, the term that Lee used earlier is pivot. I think you're right about the hospitality industry. That is going to be hard hit for a while. Yes, definitely find other industries that you can serve. It will probably be a little bit of a learning curve for you to get up to speed on the skill sets, get the contact lists in place to find out how to reach those people and to be able to build a list of candidates to use in that staffing. But I would look at every industry that you can think of that is going to be back up and running even now or in the very near future. I think you're absolutely right. You definitely need to be looking at other lines of business, for sure.
I think the one word that I would use in response to that is, yes, please be proactive. Don't just sit there and assume that everything is going to come back and be okay, because it's not. Be proactive. Take a look at the opportunities and go after them.
I know Westfield State University, for their kitchen and their food, what they did was they opened it up to the community and they kind of do like a community grocery shopping kind of thing. So people don't actually have to go into the stores. They order it and they go pick it up.
That's great. It's a great example. Thank you.
Okay, so we've talked about a lot of the things that you should be looking at. You should be analyzing, you should be thinking about. But this is not a once and done process. This is something that has to happen over and over and over. So once you go through that analytical exercise to understand all the different aspects of the business and getting to the answers of what you think revenue, the expense growth along with that revenue, the conversion of that revenue to cash, as Lee mentioned earlier. Once you get a handle on that, that is only step one. That is the plan area of this cycle, of this process. So you build your plan, and then in that next section, you need to evaluate how you actually are performing against that plan. And you need to be doing that on a regular basis. And once you find that things are not going exactly the way you had expected, and I will promise you that is always the case, because no one can predict the future perfectly, you need to understand what those variances are. What is the difference between what you thought you were going to do in your plan and what you were actually able to do in your performance? You need to understand that. And then that third segment is the modify segment. In this, you need to answer one of the two questions. You need to understand why that difference occurred, that variance from your plan. Is it something that you thought you could manage a certain way and you were not successful in doing that? Or is it something that is happening in the business? Some inherent characteristic in the business is changing, or there's something in the market around you that is changing that you cannot control? The answer to those questions, if it's the first question, then you need to make a decision about how to change your process, change your management, change your approach to bring the company's operations, the performance back in line with that plan. So you evaluate, you find out how much you're out of balance or the variance between the two, and then you say, okay, well, I need to manage this differently so that I can get back to that plan. If it is something that is in the market or in the business that you cannot control, something has changed, you cannot bring it back. You need to change your plan to match that new reality. And so you go through this process continuously: plan, evaluate, modify, plan, evaluate, modify, plan, evaluate, modify. And I promise you, if you repeat this process and you continue through this effort and you understand that in your bones, plan, evaluate, modify, you will get better and better and better outcomes. Your business will improve, you will improve as a manager, and the future will be a better place to be. If you don't go through this process, then any success that you have will be purely by luck. You cannot do this by the seat of your pants. You just cannot do it. There are people who are successful doing that, but it's pure luck. Lee, what do you want to add?
Yeah, so let me just add to that. What I advise my veteran participants who go to my program, especially at a time like this, is you've got to do a base case plan based on the reality of the revised revenue and a worst case plan. And that revenue and expense plan has got to translate into a cash flow plan, cash in, cash out, over the next 13-week period, and then keep on projecting it forward to projected versus actuals on a weekly basis to see how you're doing against the original plan. Make adjustments. Take a look at your inventory. Am I carrying too much inventory given my revised plan? Take a look at your space. Do I have too much space? Can I sublease space? Can I give some space back to the landlord? What are the things that I can do in order to try to maximize cash flow? And as Fred said, as you're going through it, as you find that you're making adjustments every time that you're experiencing some change, don't worry about that. Just keep doing that. Keep going back, evaluating, modifying, because it's going to change. There's no question that the original plan you put together will change. That's why it's so important to have a worst case plan as well. And the other thing I would go back to that we talked about a little bit, but I think it's so important, is having sufficient cash and working capital is so important. I hope you've taken advantage of the PPP and the idle loan opportunities that the SBA has given. I've got graduates who have thanked me for pointing them out to these opportunities and have taken advantage of them because you're going to need the working capital just to get through this. So please don't be bashful about going out and seeking all of the financing opportunities that are out there. And don't be bashful about seeking out, as Lisa said, all of the resources that are available to help you. You're not in this alone. There are plenty of people available to help you. So please reach out and don't feel uncomfortable about doing that.
Yeah, and those loans are still available for a short period of time. The disaster loans, I think, will be available for a longer period. The PPP, there's still money in the program. Last I heard, there was $100 billion in the program. But that window is closing very, very quickly. I think, we have until June 30th?
Yeah, well, the idle loan just opened up again. It was for agriculture, but it's now opened up again to businesses. So
right.
Yeah, the opportunities are still there. Talk to your bank, talk to the SBA, and find out what it is you can take advantage of, and feel free to pursue that.
So I have a couple of questions here. The first one is in reference to the plan, evaluate, and modify. How often do we need to do this process?
Okay. Well, there are several levels associated with that. So I'm just going to give you a high level, and then I'm going to come down to where we live today. Normally, you create a strategic plan on an annual basis, and you normally have a quarterly review of that strategic plan. And then every month, you evaluate or do an analysis on your financial statements, your P&Ls primarily, against your plan. But in my experience, where you really get the most traction in this process is if you set up a flash report that will give you 3 to 5 metrics that you can track on a daily or weekly basis, where you are tracking, again, I'm just going to use a restaurant as an example. If you're tracking customers in the door, numbers of customers per table, the average meal cost per table, however you track those, but you track them every day. And you watch that trending over time. And so you have a plan that you built. So if you build it from the ground up, to get to that strategic plan, and you then have the ability to set up a reporting system for those basic metrics to tell you how you are planning. So, how you are performing. So let's say, for example, you want to have, 100 people a day come into your restaurant, and you are averaging 42. Obviously, that's not a great number, but you're getting close to that 50% level that we were talking about before. Can you operate at that level? You need to understand that. But if you see that number going 42, 39, 41, 36, 39, 32, it's obviously going the wrong direction. If it is going the other direction, then you can start making some longer-term decisions on what you're seeing in that very short time frame that you are keeping those metrics. So you can have a plan at that level, and that plan at that level will impact that monthly plan, that quarterly plan, that annual plan. That's how often you can be doing this. If you can't do it on a daily basis, then do it on a weekly basis. If your business is such that you can't track things that closely on a daily basis, you should have a flash report that is no longer than 1 week. Have 3 to 5 indicators that are the drivers in the business. You know by looking at those how the business is operating generally, and then you can go back to your financial plan and make adjustments based on what you see there. That way you're not waiting 30 days, 60 days to make adjustments, because that's lost time. You need to have some leading indicators that are going to tell you kind of generally how the business is doing. And everybody can do this. There are metrics in every business that will give you that information.
I can't state how important what Fred said is. Everybody needs to have metrics or drivers or tools that they use to measure how well they're doing, whether it be number of people in the door, whether it be sales per square foot, whether it be gross margin by product, whatever the metrics are that you particularly need to look at in your business, come up, when you put your plan together, you're going to come up with a basis for that plan using those metrics. They may be as realistic as you can be at the moment, but you'll only know how realistic they are as you go forward and measure the actual versus the plan. And as Fred has said, if the actual is coming in close to plan, that's great, you can continue. But if it's off, then you're going to have to make adjustments. So this is a live model. This is plan, evaluate, modify is a live model that you have to use and look at as often as you can provide that information to the model. As I said, I try to do weekly cash flows, but obviously you may not be able to do that, but do it as often as you can.
Now they've asked, are there any tools that you can recommend? And I will tell you that at the end of this, when I get the list of those who attended, you will be getting an email from me with a tool that Fred Parrish is allowing us to use. But do you have any other tools besides the Profit Beacon that you would recommend for these type of to help out?
There is a tool called Live. Go ahead, Fred.
Yeah, go ahead, Lee. No, go ahead.
Well, there is a tool called Live Plan, which allows you to do something similar. And you might want to look at that as well. If you go on Live Plan, if you just Google that. Okay, Fred.
Yeah, and even if you don't have a software application or some tool that you can use, you can build a very simple spreadsheet that will give you that 13-week cash flow that Lee was talking about. It's a fairly simple model. Be more than happy to talk to some of you about that if you're interested in doing that. Worst case, if you have no tool, get out a piece of paper and a pencil and start working that way, and then build from there. You start where you are, and then over time, you just add more sophistication as you are able to do that. And I promise you, even with a pencil and paper, you will be light years ahead of those people who will not do that.
And I will tell you at the end of this slide, there are resources, and I actually did put the SBA template resource out there, which does have those financial reports that you can go out to. And let me pull up another question. In reference to advertising, what their concern is let me do the liquidation one first. So the question was, if somebody needs to liquidate, at what point should they, if they have too many supplies, at what point should they liquidate? And should they liquidate if they have too much at a loss?
So let me take that one. So
okay.
If you feel as though you have too many supplies and you need to get rid of them, the best way to do that and to be able to do that on a basis where you can minimize your losses is to try to do that while you're running your business. Maybe you take discounts on the product and sell them off. Maybe you've got a web and you can sell them on your web online. But try to do that in a manner where you sell them off over a period of time at a discount as opposed to just running an auction sale. Because with an auction sale, you've got to hire an auctioneer, it gets very expensive, and you're not going to get as much for that inventory as you would otherwise if you just try to run it out over a period of time yourself. That would be my recommendation.
No, that's excellent.
So we are in very difficult times. To plan, evaluate, and modify is tough when you are dealing with people's fears of shopping. I own a specialty store and have little competition except from the internet. How can I build what you are saying?
Okay, I mean, again, start out in a simple way. I would say, I would think that you already have a plan in your head. You know generally how the business is doing today. You know generally how you want the business to start to grow over time. And you have, I would think, a reasonably good understanding of what that cost structure might look like. So it's just a matter of taking that information from your head and putting it into a spreadsheet or some software application that will give you the ability to track that. You don't want to be tracking things on paper forever. But if that's where you need to start, that's where you need to start. You will not know the answer to the question, what do I do now, if you are expecting 20 people a day to come into your store and only 5 are coming. Or if your revenue per customer, you had in the past seen, I don't know, let's say $50 per customer, and for whatever reason, you're only getting 30. Or let's say, you get overrun in the first 2 or 3 months, and then it tails off again, and people were just coming in and getting things they were not able to do during the shutdown. They're going to get all that done early and quickly, and then the business is going to fall off again. You have to be in a position to understand what that means. You can't wait until you're in the middle of a crisis to respond, because if you do, you have a much lower chance of success. So any kind of, like Lee was saying earlier, develop a couple of plans. One best case, one worst case, maybe one expected case in the middle. And then you'll see how you're tracking against each one of those. But you definitely need to think out a month or 2 or 3, both on a revenue basis, get to your profitability, and again, as Lee said earlier, you've got to get back to that cash flow number.
Can I just add to that? I also talked earlier about pivoting. So one of the things you might look at is, what can I do differently to promote my business? Can I do more advertising? Can I do more promotions? Can I run discounts? Can I send out flyers? What can I do? Can I sell product online? What if people aren't coming in the door? What can I do to bring them in the door? That'll make me, I may not make as much profit as I made before on individual items, and my margins may have to be less. But think outside the box. What can you do to get people in the door?
And I'd like to add to that, because one thing that I can't harp on enough is that if you are a specialty store, it generally means that you're an expert at something. Otherwise, you wouldn't have those specialty items. If you're not on some form of social media, get on some form of social media. It is a very inexpensive way to advertise, but you can also connect with other people. And you have to be heard in the noisy world. And right now, what is your story? Why do you have those specialty stores? There's a reason that you chose that specialty. The reason you chose those items in that store. Share your story. Let people know why they should come to you. And like Lee said, if you can look at selling to see if you can sell online, absolutely look at it and see if that's something that you can do. But that does bring us right directly to the next question, which is, how much can we spend on advertising? Any percentage from the total of net revenue? How long do we need to test the method of advertising?
Fred, why don't you take that?
Okay. All right. Well, disclaimer, I am a recovering accountant. So any advice I give you on advertising, it's worth what it is. So what I would suggest is to be as frugal as possible until you get a good handle on what's going to work. What Lisa was just saying about social media, is that it is very interesting, because this is being broadcast live on Facebook. You could do Facebook live broadcast just by walking around your store with your phone and showing different things. You could go out on the sidewalk and talk to people about certain things, wear your mask if necessary, but take novel approaches, do something different. I think today, the idea of putting flyers on someone's front door, that's probably not going to be terribly effective, and it's pretty expensive to do that. Find ways that you can promote your business that is not going to cost you an arm and a leg, and get your message out. Just like Lisa said, what is that story? How are you going to present your business? What sets you apart from everybody else in your ocean? And you have to be able to stand apart, get above the noise, and let people see you. And you're going to have to find novel ways to do that.
So broad-based advertising is not going to work. You've got to focus, focus, focus. Find, as Lisa said, find that little gem that makes you different. Find out who those customers are, who that market is, and focus your advertising so that you know that the market you're going after sets you apart from your competition.
And so the next question is, how can I plan for 6 months from now if we don't know what 6 months from now looks like? You've already discussed the plan and modify, and that you have to keep modifying. But if I was to sit down today and I said, okay, I don't know what 6 months looks like. I know what I did a year ago. At what point should I start to look at 6 months from now if it's going to be different?
A year ago is out the window. Go
Right.
back to what Fred said. You can only plan what you can plan. Make the best guess. Do 2 or 3 different plans, right? Do a base case, a best case, and a worst case, right? And as you go through it, you will see how you're doing against one of those plans, and you will make adjustments. Nobody has a crystal ball. We don't know what 6 months is going to look like, right? All you can do is respond to what is actually happening in your market. So I think go back to what Fred was saying earlier, plan, modify, adjust.
And I would say, look at it this way. If I'm in the Dallas area, if I was to get in the car and want to drive to North Carolina where my parents live, I would have to sit down and plan that route. Now, that's easy enough because we know what roads are there. We know what other options there are for the southern route, the northern route, whatever that is. But here is my point. Somewhere along that route, there may be construction. And I'm going to have to get out my phone and reroute my trip and go a different direction. That's all we're talking here. You sit down, you make your initial plan. You see how you are tracking along that plan. If you run into a roadblock or you run into an issue that you need to turn a different direction, then revise the plan for that change. And again, like Lee was saying, if you do a best case, worst case, expected case, then you will know very quickly which one you're starting to track with. And you can start down that path exclusively until you run into a problem. Because I promise you, there is no one on the planet, whether it's a $100 billion company, or if it is a small startup with one person and just trying to get off the ground. No one can predict the future, even 3 months out. But you've got to at least have a plan. Otherwise, you're just going to be running in circles. You're not going to know what to do. You already have a plan. You're trying to start your business. You're trying to get something going. Get that something out of your head, down on a piece of paper, or in a spreadsheet that you can start building on over time, and just monitor how you are performing against that plan.
Sam, can you put up the slide with Fred and Lee, please? So since we only have
Which
a
slide,
couple,
Lisa?
the one at the end with Fred and Lee's email address. Sorry,
Okay,
guys,
sure.
email address out there.
No problem. Hold on.
No problem.
So we only have just about 4 minutes left. So do either of you have any final thoughts for everybody?
So I'll start, Fred, and then you can finish up.
Okay.
So my summary of all of this is, look, we're in unprecedented times. Nobody knows what the future is going to be. All we know is it's not going to be like it was last year. It's going to be different. We don't know what that's going to look like. You've got to be able to pivot and adjust. You've got to plan. You've got to not panic because everybody's in the same situation. You've got to come up with your best possible idea as to how this is going to go forward. And then be able to make pivots as you go because we know it's going to be different. We know it's going to change. But be proactive. No decision is a decision. You're going to need financing. You're going to need to maximize cash flow. You're going to need to pivot. You're going to need to be creative. So take a step back. Use this as an opportunity to work on your business. Don't just get caught in the details of the day-to-day. Take a step back and figure out what the opportunities might be to pivot, to take advantage of what's out there. But make sure that you move forward in a manner that is going to be constructive and not just sit and wait for things to happen. Because if you wait for things to happen, it's not going to be good.
Yeah, absolutely. I know that some of what we've talked about here is a little frustrating because you're sitting there thinking, how can I plan because I don't know what's going to happen? That's absolutely true. But it's just like anything else. When you get out of bed in the morning, you have a plan for the day. But probably before you hit the front door on your way out, that plan has changed because something happened you didn't expect. The difference between the planning for your company and you trying to get out the door to get your day started is that some of those things that happen in your business or to your business can be fatal if you're not able to react quickly enough and change your path. So you have to have at least a minimal plan in place that you can be working toward all the time. You do not want to be caught just in a random world where you don't really know what your next step is going to be. It's extremely important. It's not easy, but it's extremely important.
And it's also important that you reach out to these resources because there are people here who can help you if you have issues.
Yes.
I'd like to just add, I see that my veteran site is not on here. So if you could just add vetrn.org, I'd appreciate it. If anybody's interested in the possibility of looking at joining one of our veteran programs, I'd be happy to help you. If you want to send me an email, and I'll respond. Thank you.
Oh, sorry about that, Lee. Don't know how I missed that one. It's one of the most important ones out there next to Fred's. So before I get to the last question that somebody just sent in, I do want to make sure that everybody knows the most important thing for you to do at this point is to make sure if you are a minority-based business, reach out to the SBA. They are doing very specific minority-based resources and information. So please reach out to them because there's a lot going on right now, and I don't want you to miss out on any opportunities. I've been on a couple of their calls, and they are well worth your time. The last question is, do you believe we are in a V-shaped recession/economy?
I think the recession is more like a U-shaped or a W-shaped. I don't think it's going to be a V-shaped. It's going to take a while.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think it will bounce back. It may look a bit like a check mark instead of a V, where we had a deep dip, and then we'll come back to a point, but then there are going to be other factors that start to influence things a little bit down the road.
And we will make sure that we will email you out the minority resources in the SBA. I will send that link to Sam so it can go in that email.
So the last thing I'd like to just add is, everybody, you're not alone. The reason this webinar is so important is because you need to understand there are resources there to help you. This is not about you sitting worrying about what's going to happen. Oh my God. People can help you. Just reach out and take advantage of this opportunity.
Okay, Sam, it's on you now. Thank you, Fred. Thank you, Lee. I greatly appreciate you all stepping
Thanks,
out.
Lisa.
Thank you.
Great. Yes. Thank you so much for that. We appreciate it. Thank you all for joining us today. I'm going to be showing a few things here. Let's see if it works. I'm trying to see. Nope, that's not the correct one. Trying to find the correct page here to show you real quick. Was hoping that I could show you the contact information for all of the folks who are making these webinars possible, including SCORE, the Center for Women Enterprise, Franklin County CDC, Valley Community Development Corporation, and thank you to our funders, the Small Business Administration and the state of Massachusetts for funding our programs and making these webinars possible. Thank you, Fred, and thank you, Lee, for presenting today. I certainly took away a lot of great information that I want to share with my clients, my business clients. On the screen is contact information for the folks here, for the folks who are here locally in Western Massachusetts, ready to help you with your business. And it's from the various organizations that I mentioned earlier. And here's a list of all of the offices of the Small Business Development Center throughout the state. So you should have an office that's close to you where you can reach out and connect with a business advisor that can help you individually and confidentially and at no cost with your business. And our website is posted there, msbdc.org. With that, thanks again, everyone, for joining today's webinar. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.